Hello and welcome to the YouTube channel for craftworld.eldar.com. I'm Brent, and in this video, I'm going to be talking about the Guardian Battlehost with a Wraith Knight as a possibly highly competitive option for tournament play. And this is happening because Joel Davis, whom I don't know and have never met, finished third with this in an 82-person grand tournament in Denver, where, as is typical, no other Eldari lists got anywhere into the top 8. Space Elves are in a pretty hard place right now in competitive play. They've got a significantly lower than 50% win rate, and they're not getting to the podium in GTs very often, and they're often also not in the last 8. So we're paying for the sins of the earlier part of the edition. But in this landscape of salty elf tiers and elf obstacles, Joel Davis, with this list, the hubris of which is mind-blowing, finished third. And he called his list, "I swear I think I know what I'm doing," which is amazing. So Joel, if you're out there somewhere and you'd like to do an audio-only interview just for Discord members, I would love to have you on to have that conversation. But in this video, we're going to be doing a deep dive on Guardian Battlehost with all within the context of Joel's list and why I think it worked, in large part because it leans heavily into all of the tricks and powerful buffs that Guardian Battlehost provides, albeit to a very narrow list of units. And although Guardian Battlehost might sound like it's the build that kind of wants to be a horde build, Joel's list is a very finely tuned, very small collection of super juiced powerful units that are CP hungry, need to be treated like a Stradivarius violin for success, but have the opportunity and the potential to be mind-blowingly potent when played in a particular way. So first I'm going to run you through what Guardian Battlehost is. I'm going to go through it pretty quick. And then we're going to look at Joel's list, and we're going to revisit these elements of Guardian Battlehost as we talk about Joel's list and how I think it probably works. Because I am absolutely convinced that if you do want to run Guardian Battlehost, some version of this probably is your best option. Now, to begin with, Guardian Battlehost is a detachment that has rules that really only benefit Guardians, support weapons, which are crewed by Guardians, Warwalkers, which are driven by Guardians, and then also Dire Avengers, because that's traditionally the other battle line shuriken unit, although Joel doesn't have any in his list for reasons that we'll talk about. The detachment rule is defend at all costs. Each time a Dire Avenger, Guardian, support weapon, or Warwalker model from your army makes an attack, if that model's unit and or the target, so either you or the target, is within range of one or more objective markers, you add 1 to the hit roll. It's really powerful for mass shuriken fire, and it's really good for weapons like D cannons or bright lances on Warwalkers, because oftentimes one of those two things will be true. There are 4 enhancements. Joel has 2 of these. The first one, Craftworld's Champion, gives the bearer an objective control of 5. Okay, probably never going to take it. Ethereal Pathways, when I did my Codex review and I talked about Guardian Battlehost, I think I said that this one was probably non-negotiable. Joel seems to agree. Ethereal Pathways, you give it to an Azuryani model, and in the deploy armies step, select up to 2 Guardian units from your army. Models in the selected units have the Infiltrator's ability. And notice there's nothing in the way this is phrased that requires the unit that has Ethereal Pathways to be in one of those Guardian units. But you've got a couple of Guardian units that you can set up more or less in the middle of the board if you want to. Then there's Protector of the Paths, which is another one that Joel took. You give it to a model that's either leading Dire Avengers, so that would be an Autarch, or Guardians, so that would likely be a Farseer. I guess it could be a Singleton Warlock. And it allows you to fire Overwatch for no CP and to hit on 5s instead of 6s, or 4s if the unit is on an objective. That's very powerful, especially on an objective, and especially given that Guardians with Warlocks with Torrent weapons that hit automatically already want to be doing Overwatch. The last one, Breath of Vol, you give to a model leading Storm Guardians, and it lets you reroll damage rolls for your fusion guns and number of shots for your flamers, and that's kind of fine, but you're probably not going to take it. There's 6 stratagems, all of which are good. The only thing that's limited about them is that the units you can use them on are incredibly narrowly defined, but all of them are powerful. The first one, Warding Salvos, can be used in the shooting phase or the fight phase. You can use it on Dire Avengers or Guardians. In practice, I think you almost exclusively use this in the shooting phase. Until the end of phase, you can, if the thing that you're targeting is on an objective, you can reroll the wound roll. That is, of course, incredibly powerful, especially for souped up Guardian units with Warlock Conclaves and characters attached. Shield Nodes is a 1-point stratagem that you can use in your opponent's shooting phase or fight phase, and you use it on Dire Avengers or Guardians. And if your models are on an objective, you can subtract 1 from your opponent's wound rolls, which definitely helps with durability. The next one, Vol's Vengeance. That's the one that this lets you shoot with a Warwalker as though it were your shooting phase if your opponent destroys a Dire Avenger or Guardian unit, but you have to shoot the unit that targeted the thing. This is probably the one I'm most skeptical about. But in the current meta, in which there are a lot of knights, having a free round of shooting with Bright Lances against a knight that just stomped on a Guardian unit might not be bad. The next one is called Time to Strike. You use it on Storm Guardians in your movement phase, and when they advance, they automatically move 6, and they can still shoot with weapons that don't have assault, and they can still declare a charge. This is really good for getting the most out of those fusion guns and for getting Eldred around the board to use his ability, which we'll talk about later. Blades of Azurian is the next one. You use it on Dire Avengers or Guardians in your opponent's, in your shooting phase, and it lets you treat all of your ranged weapons as though they have the pistol ability. This is actually totally sick and super important, especially for the Warlock Conclaves and characters that are likely to be attached to Guardian units. This is the best and arguably only answer to robust melee engagement from your opponent, which can be a real problem. One of the challenges that the Guardian Battlehost faces is that it doesn't have none of its abilities benefit any dedicated melee units. So this is pretty clutch. It takes your Guardians from being relatively ineffective when engaged to being absolutely devastating. And the last one, Cost of Victory, is just amazing. It's 1 CP, like all of these, and at the end of your opponent's fight phase, you pick a Guardian unit from your army. If it's not within engagement range of 1 or more enemy units, remove it from the battlefield, place it into strategic reserves, and when you do, you return every destroyed Guardian model to your unit. So it leaves the board on your opponent's turn, all your Guardians come back to life, and then you bring it in on your own turn. Now, it is worth noting that you can't be clever here. If you used ethereal pathways to give that Guardian unit the Infiltrator's ability, it doesn't mean you can deep strike with it when you bring it back in, because Infiltrators only applies during deployment. But the ability to resurrect all of that Guardian chaff standing between your opponent and killing the characters that are really dangerous, and then put the Guardians back on a board edge it's pretty great. Okay, let's take a quick look at Joel's list. In the character section, he has Eldred for 110 points. Eldred's big advantage, it comes with 2 big advantages. One is that he gives you an extra CP every turn, which is really important for this list that's very CP hungry. And then the second one is that he has the Doom power at the end of your movement phase. So after he's moved, which is important, he can point at an enemy unit within 18 inches and say, shoot it better, and until the start of your next command phase. So this means also when you're firing Overwatch, Eldari models that make an attack against the enemy unit add 1 to the wound roll. This is incredibly powerful because it means that all of that mass shuriken cannon, catapult fire, and the destructor ability on the ridiculous number of warlocks in this list can wound really durable stuff on 5s. So the Guardians become a threat to everything, as do the warlocks. So Eldred's really important here. Then Joel has 2 Farseers. both are 70 points, but one is 90 points because it also has Protector of the Paths, which is the one that lets its unit fire Overwatch for free and hit on 5s or 4s if it's on an objective. And then he has 3 Warlocks, one of which has Ethereal Pathways, which is the thing that lets you treat 2 Guardian units as though they're infiltrators. That's a lot of characters. He then has 3 units of Guardians, 2 units of Guardian Defenders. 1 unit of Guardian Defenders with a Bright Lance, and 2 units of Storm Guardians, which have the normal Storm Guardian stuff. He then has a D-Cannon support platform, which provides some extra ranged murder into the current Knight meta, because the D-Cannon not only is just a really good weapon that does d6+2 damage and sometimes gets devastating wounds, but it rerolls damage rolls of 1, and when you shoot a Titanic model, it just rerolls the damage roll. So good into Knights. And then it benefits from the Guardian Battlehost rule that lets you reroll hit rolls of 1, which makes the penalty for indirect, where you can never hit on better than a 4, not as bad. But I think Joel is probably also often firing direct with this. He then has 2 units of Shroud Runners, which are both good for stripping cover, which has good synergy with all of those Shuriken Catapult and Destructor shots that can wound anything on 5s with Eldred's help. But also, these are the only quick disposable units in the army that can simply be tossed away to score secondaries, and you need some of those. Then Joel has 2 Warwalkers, which I guess can also be tossed aside to score secondaries. They're only 5 points more than a Shroud Runner. This brings 4 Bright Lances to the table. They not only give Joel access to the shoot when a Guardian unit dies stratagem, which I actually think is not that important for this list, but they also give additional AP against the target that they target. So if you take a shot at a Knight with a couple of those Bright Lances, even if the Bright Lances don't do any damage, now when you do the massed fire with your Shuriken weapons and your Destructor Warlock stuff that with Eldred's help can wound on 5s, now the AP is good enough that you're really messing up the target. Joel then has 3 4-elf Warlock Conclaves, all of which, like those individual Warlocks and like those 2 Farseers and Eldred and probably the D-Cannon, are all combined into single units. This list has very few actual pieces because they're all glommed together. So what I suspect he's doing is he has Eldred and 1 Warlock and a 4 Warlock Conclave attached to a Storm Guardian unit that's probably using Ethereal Pathways to deploy to the midfield to be close enough to use Eldred's thing. The 5-up invuln that Storm Guardians have give Eldred a little extra survivability. And the Warwalkers and the bikes that can make scout moves in games where it's appropriate can move before the game starts to support the 2 Guardian units that maybe have deployed to the midfield. Then there's going to be another Storm Guardian unit that has a Farseer, a Warlock, and 4 Warlocks. And then I think he's probably got the Farseer with the free Overwatch shooting Ethereal Pathways ability, 5 Warlocks, and the D-Cannon all attached to the Guardian Defenders that also have a platform with a Bright Lance and pretty good shooting. And just in case anyone out there is angrily typing a comment about how you can't have 5 Warlocks in a squad, you actually can, because in the pre-game step, you can attach both the Farseer and the Warlock to a unit of Guardians, because there's a special rule that lets the a singleton Warlock and a Farseer attached to the same Guardian unit, and then that's like the pregame stuff. And then when you're doing your declaration step, the Warlock Conclave does not have the leader keyword. It does not have the leader keyword in the same way that the D-Cannon platform doesn't. So it's not prevented from glomming on, just as the D-Cannon is not prevented from glomming on. So it is possible to have 5 Warlocks in there with a Farseer and also a support weapon, which is I think what Joel's doing in the Guardian Defender unit. So like that's a unit that has all of the Shuriken Fire and the Bright Lance and the incredibly powerful shooting on the D cannon, and 5d6 Warlock Conclave Destructor shots, which are all automatically hitting with Torrent at strength 7 because of the Psychic Communion roll, with -1 AP, 1 damage, unless, of course, you shot the thing with the Warwalker or used Eldritch's Doom on it, and then it's even better. And you have the Eldritch Storm shooting attack from the Farseer, which is D6 shots at strength 6, -2 flat 3, which is not bad either. And the Farseer has Guide, so you can pick a target and within 18 inches and give everything +1 to hit against it. So if you're within 18 inches of a solid shooting target, your Destructor shots are all automatically hitting if you're within 12, but everything else is hitting on 2s, which is crazy cool, including that D cannon if it's direct fire. And the Farseer has Branching Fates, so after you've rolled, you can change a hit roll, a wound roll, or a damage roll for anything that's not the D cannon to a 6. So you can make a Bright Lance like automatically do 8 damage if it wounded. And you could pop Warding Salvos to let you reroll all the wound rolls. So if you really opened up on something with Warding Salvos and like Eldred had cursed it, you would have like 20-ish regular shuriken shots, like wounding on 5s, rerolling on all the wound rolls, which I think makes it better than a 4-up to wound. Coming in at -2 AP because of the Warwalker. You could strip cover with the Shroud Runners. The D cannon is hitting at strength 16 D3 times, hitting on 2s at this point, re-rolling the wound roll with -4 would become -5 AP for D6 plus 2 damage, devastating wounds on 6s, blast, and if it's a Titanic, you're re-rolling damage rolls of 1 and the whole damage roll if it's Titanic. Like, this will kill a knight and probably just about anything else. And if your opponent tries to get close enough to charge, you can just Overwatch for free and wreck them, because if they're close enough to charge, you'll hit them with 5d6 torrent attacks that will hit crazy hard. And then your D cannon and your Bright Lance and all of your Shuriken Fire and your Eldritch Storm will all hit on 5s because of the enhancement, or 4s if you're standing on an objective. And if your opponent doesn't try to charge you, you still do Overwatch. So this is a unit that is potentially firing twice per battle round. That is crazy. And you could always deploy it as an infiltrator to the midfield to get direct fire on that D cannon. It's just so good. And then if your opponent kills a bunch of the Guardians but doesn't quite wipe them out, you can always just use Cost of Victory to make this unit disappear from the board, then come in on a board edge on your next turn with like totally revived. All of the Guardians are back to life. That's really good. It is worth noting that if all of the Guardians die, it's no longer a Guardian unit, so you can't use Cost of Victory anymore. It's like that. Then everything, the D cannon and the Autarch and they become independent units. I'm not the Autarch, the Farseer, excuse me. And then the same thing becomes true for Eldred's. A lot of that math is similar for the unit that Eldred is leading and the Storm Guardian unit, and then the Storm Guardian unit being led by the other Farseer. You have crazy cool shooting on your turn. You're probably overwatching somewhere on the board with one of your Guardian units, maybe for free if it's the one that's tripped out for that. And between Eldred's ability and the ability to get extra AP and strip cover, there's really nothing that you can't kill. And I think the real engine, the murder engine of the Storm Guardian units, the fusion guns are nice and everything, but it's really the 5d6 auto hitting strength 7 destructor shots that with the Warwalker can be juiced to -2 AP. And then these Warlock Conclaves also do other things for the units. Like a Warlock Conclave gives, if a Farseer is leading the unit, forces enemies to subtract 1 from the wound roll. So there's some extra durability. And the Warlock forces enemies that are trying to charge the unit to subtract 2 from the charge roll. Now, usually opponents can play around that, but it's not bad. It really helps with... I like this kind of ability when your opponent is like trying to get that 9-inch long bomb charge and they're going to reroll it to make it a little more statistically likely. Taking it from a 9 to an 11 pretty much shuts it down completely. So this is a list with 3 Guardian units that can be -1 to wound. The Storm Guardians have a 5-up invuln. 2 of them can deploy anywhere on the field. They're all incredibly powerful and potent shooting threats that can, using the, especially with Eldred and the Warwalkers and the other bikes, can really dial it up to like 13 against a specific target. But even if they don't, they're pretty scary into just about any target. If your opponent kills a bunch of them, they can disappear off the table and come back healthy somewhere else. In the event that your opponent actually manages to get into melee with you, then in your shooting phase, you can treat all your shooting weapons like pistols, so that all of those warlocks, they're 5d6 auto hitting, strength 7 murder shots should wipe anything that manages to engage you in melee, unless it's like a knight or some big powerful monster with an invuln, and even still you'll really mess it up. And then the last tool on the list, which I haven't mentioned because you may have noticed that there's some points missing here, is a Wraith Knight with a Ghost Glaive, a Scatter Shield, and a couple of Star Cannons. I've got, like, the Wraith Knight is the part of this list that I am most baffled by. Like, I understand why it's here. It provides this massive, monstrous countercharge threat. The one thing that could really, not the one, but one of the things that could really go wrong with this list is if your opponent has the capacity for multiple simultaneous melee engagements with pretty powerful monsters or knights or big mechs or something. You can only fire Overwatch once. So you can have this durable Wraith Knight barreling down the field that is going to potentially be able to screen your Guardians from those kinds of charges, or be a counterpuncher. Or if your opponent doesn't have anything like that, just cleave into your opponent's line and be a major distraction while those 3 units of ridiculously souped up Guardians and Psychers really get the job done. And the Wraith Knight just doesn't need any support. I mean, there's nothing that can really support it anyway, but it's, it's got the 2-up save with the 4-up invuln for that shield and 18 wounds. That's pretty durable for an elf. And the Titanic Ghost Glaive either has 5 attacks at strength 16, -3 flat 6 damage, so good into tanks and monsters, or that sweep attack, strength 8, -2 flat 2, will wipe out Marines and heavy infantry and any other kind of infantry. And also, even though it initially looks like this list doesn't have a lot of long-range, heavy target elimination shooting, the fact that the Wraith Cannon has the 2 Star Cannons on its shoulders, in combination with the 4 Bright Lances on the Warwalkers, the 1 Bright Lance in the Guardian unit, and the D Cannon, means that there is enough long-range shooting in this list, probably to pick up 1 hard target a turn at range while you're doing everything else. And I find that's often really important in Eldari lists. There's a lot of it's post-Codex. It used to be different. But post-Codex, there's a lot of very powerful target elimination in Eldari lists at close to medium range, but sometimes they struggle to get the job done at long range. And this list can do it into at least 1 target, which is, I think, kind of what you need. I think that's sort of like the gold standard. So it really does do all the things. I don't totally understand why the Wraith Knight apparently worked as well as it did, simply because there's no hard target saturation in this list. The only other hard targets are the Warwalkers, which aren't really that hard, so it seems that your opponent can just kind of target the Wraith Knight with everything that is good into hard targets. They're not going to be using their las cannons on your Guardian units, that's for sure, and they don't need to use them on your Shroud Runners. But maybe part of the reason this is working is that a lot of people have lists right now tripped out to kill knights by using anti-vehicle abilities. The Wraith Knight doesn't have the vehicle keyword. It is a monster, though, and plenty of stuff is anti-monster. So I don't know. If you're out there, Joel, and we do an interview, you can explain to me why the Wraith Knight does this job better than 3 Wraith Lords, which you could also have, and they're Psychers all over the board, so it seems like they would do okay. or the Avatar of Cain, and then you have 120 points left over to help address the lack of redundancy, which seems to me to be the only thing about the list that makes it, I think, quite hard to play, despite its incredibly powerful tools. Because if it's being run the way I think it's being run, there are only 8 units on the table, which is significantly fewer than what I look for in tournament play, or the last time I think Boone was a guest on this channel, I can't remember what he said his minimum was, but it was around mine, and it's significantly more than this. So like, what do you do when you start losing stuff? If you lose Eldred and you can no longer wound hard targets on 5s, you still have some robust hard target, a limb, but that's rough. Once you lose the Warwalkers, which probably happens pretty quick, maybe you can't get the additional armor pen. Secondary, just having units that can perform secondary actions when they're then not going to be able to do the other thing, those bikes are probably going to die pretty quick. I feel like all of this works really well, but then when you start losing stuff, it can still be very killy, but because you can still do the Overwatch, the auto hit on Overwatch with all the torrent weapons. Any one of those Guardian units, even without significant support, can be very powerful, and you have 3. But I worry about just having enough units spread out around the table to score secondaries and do actions once you start taking casualties. And some of the combos that make the Guardians especially effective into hard targets might start to become less viable. So I think one of the challenges of playing this list is probably making really accurate and careful predictions about just what it is you're going to lose each turn, and then how you're going to play around that going forward. And based on Joel's performance with this, I have to think that he is a truly excellent player, because although this list, again, it has very powerful tools that you wouldn't need to be a highly skilled player to do a bunch of damage with these tools. But to make the game time decisions about target priority and exact unit placement and what exactly you can afford to lose and exactly how to spend those command points, that's pretty top level stuff. So well done, Joel. And even though I think that this is definitely a super high skill army build, it's certainly something, if you have the models, it's certainly something that you can play around with. Just from a practical perspective, for new people who don't have a bunch of old metal Eldari models, I think the hardest thing about running a list like this is the Warlocks. You need to buy, like 8 boxes of Warlocks to make this work. And it's annoying that they're mono-posed with fixed weapon loadouts. I love all the new Eldari kits, but I'm not quite sure why we didn't get like a Seer Council kit that's a Farseer, a customizable Farseer, and 4 customizable Warlock models, instead of 2 monoposed Warlocks, one with a Singing Spear and one with a sword, and that's what you get. The models are beautiful, but that does end up being a little bit of a feel-bad purchase, I must admit. But there are a lot of them on eBay, and also if you do want to add something like this to your collection, if at your local game store, there's somebody who has Eldar but doesn't really play them anymore, or just that guy who's been collecting every army since 2007 or something, you could ask, hey, do you have any Eldari Warlocks you would sell? There's a ton of like old metal Warlocks out in the ecosystem, and it's probably a more reasonable way to pick them up if you don't already have them in the collection, is to look secondhand for older models, because they're not old enough yet that they're like super valuable collector's items. So that's what I've got. I love this list. I think it's one of the most innovative and sort of like bizarrely high risk successful lists I've seen from Eldari since the beginning of the edition. And I always have a special place in my heart for lists that I would not have thought would have worked that well. 3rd place in an 82-person open is no joke. If you have your own thoughts on Guardian Battlehost, please leave those in the comments below. But don't tell me why Joel's list won't work, because it does work, obviously. Although I do think it might be an especially good moment in the meta with all the knights for something like this. But nevertheless, it's obviously a competitively viable list, even if it's not always going to be a GT podium list. Special thanks, as always, to my sponsor, the Magnet Baron, to my amazing autarchs over on the Discord, who are a delightful community that you too could join for $3 a month. I'll link that in the video description. And to all of you for listening to this content. If you want to help me out and say hi and like the video, that's great. That helps keep this content coming. Or you could say something more interesting than hi. I like that too. Okay, bye. Back again soon. Take care.